I'm excited to introduce to you. And these two individuals actually are from Forrester. Both of them are industry icons and speakers and friends personally of mine as well. And I enjoy listening to their content. I also enjoy reading their content. And they're here to talk to us about the state of sales enablement. Combined, there's over 40 years of sales enablement, and marketing channel experience. We can learn a lot from them, and the best part about this is one of 4 major keynotes, and they get to go first. So I need your help. Please rise to your feet, rise up, and do me a favor. Can I get some loud clapping and welcome these two to the stage? Heather Cole and Maria Chen with Forrester!
Mic's on? Oh, yeah. Okay, good deal. So I don't know about you, but every time Mario throws up on the screen icebreaker, I get a little nervous. And from the laughs, I think you've seen him before, but for any of you who have not been here over the last couple of years, I can tell you there's been some interesting ones. They've involved a lot of physical contact. So essentially, I think 2 years ago, we were doing a lot of hugging, and I got very close to a gentleman from Australia who was from AWS, where we had to go back to back and read each other's minds, and I might be bringing back memories for some of you. But while we have an opening that is not as analyst-y as we usually do, we do have something that's a little bit different. But it is not involving any type of physical contact, and you do not have to stand up. Yay. No hugs here. So want to make sure that you have right now, if you don't have a pen in your hand or a pencil or something that you can record on, ask that you grab that real quick. We don't have polling capabilities. We're going to go the old-fashioned way. We're going to do a quiz. Don't worry, we're not quizzing your knowledge of the state of sales enablement or really anything to do with sales enablement at all. So our first question for you is, what % of the world's population lives in low-income countries? Low-income countries. Give you a second to get your pens. The answers are 9%, 18%, or 45%. The second question we have for you is, what is the average life expectancy worldwide for a baby if they were born today? Is that 56%, 56 years, 70 years, or 82 years? And our third question is, in all low-income countries, what is the % of girls who actually finish primary or elementary school to the grade of 5? Is that 48%, 60%, or 90%? And then finally, what % of the entire world population has access to electricity? Is it 36, 54, or 80? So some of you may recognize this quiz if you are familiar with an organization called Gapminder. Gapminder wrote a book called Factfulness a little over a year ago. And the original survey had 13 questions in it. Now, the interesting thing about it is that many people do not get these questions right.
Well, before we do the big reveal of the answers, a little spoiler alert. This test was given to both humans and monkeys actually got the answers right more often than humans. By the way, including this human when Heather made me take this quiz 2 days ago.
So the answers, as you see up here, are 9, 70, 60, and 80 for the questions. And one of the things that we see is that very few people get all of them right. So did anybody here get every single question right? Holy moly.
Oh, good. There'll be
Worked.
no
Oh,
more
thank
prizes,
God.
Mario.
You never know when you do one of these quizzes. So the interesting thing about this is that, as she said, most people don't, because what you have learned about the world is a preconceived notion, and much of that comes from the learning that you had a while ago. So whether you're 25 or whether you're 65 sitting in this room, your understanding of the world and what is going on in this world is actually a combination of who you learned it from and when they learned it. So go back that far. And then also what you hear in the news, which people don't generally report on really exciting positive things that are going on in the world. We hear about the negative. So we hear a lot of things that give us those preconceptions and change the way we think about it, but it's actually not based in reality. And you say, Heather, this was interesting, but why do I care? I am going to encourage you today, as we're going through this session, but also in the next 2 days, as you're sitting through other people's sessions, to think about how the preconceived notions that you have around enablement and what enablement means, and to think about it differently, as opposed to judging from your worldview, opening your mind to new ideas and different ways of doing it. Don't settle, don't say, oh, everything's great. Push back, get better ideas, but be open to it and recognize your own preconceived notions as we're going through. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some stats that are not as counterintuitive as the ones that we just talked about. One of the stats that we've been tracking for quite some time is the percentage of organizations who say, are you getting an increase in your budget for sales enablement? And going back to about 2012, when we really could say people were saying, we are an enablement organization and not something else. So we're only going to go back as far as that. And at that time, over a third of the organizations told us that they were getting a significant increase in their budget for the coming year to invest. Interestingly enough, that was primarily the reason. They said, what are you going to do with that money? And they said, well, we're going to continue to invest it in the direct sales force. We're building up our programs for them. That's where this money is going. Moving on to the next few years, we see that in 2014, now 53% of the organizations are saying, hey, we are getting an increase in our budget. And this was primarily because they're saying we've done a good job with the direct sales force, but we're getting scope creep or an expanded footprint or a span of control, depending on if you want to talk about it in a positive or negative voice. And we're looking at investing in tech resources and also more in the channel side as well. And then finally, coming into 2019, what we're seeing is over 3/4 of the organizations are now getting an increase coming into 2020 in their sales enablement budget that is significant. So over 10%, 20% in that range. So show of hands here. Do you have your budgets for next year? And if you do, are you getting an increase? Some of you, yeah. The good news about this is when we see organizations that are getting a significant increase, they tend to be taking on more and more challenges, and they are expanding that footprint beyond what we would think of traditional roles within enablement.
So we need to think about what are the challenges. We're making larger investments in enablement, which is great, but some specific challenges remain constant across all selling roles. And those challenges are, when we talk and survey sellers, both direct and indirect channel partners, 72% of them say that they cannot connect offerings to buyer needs and challenges. We are in an audience-centric world. If our sellers can't articulate and feel confident and competent in order to address buyer needs, they're not going to advance the sale. Buyers are very specific and want information that is very relevant and resonates with them. 69% of sellers said they couldn't differentiate the offerings from the competition or move buyers off status quo. Now, I live and breathe in the channel world, and our channel partners can sell more than just our offerings. So if we don't articulate and help enable them in telling the value story and why it is different than the competition and it is the offering that truly fits the solution needs and is better than the other, then we are not going to outperform our peers. And lastly, 65% of them said that they had poor content quality or inaccessibility. Now, And again, in the partner world, I sometimes refer to this as the content graveyard that has become our portals. We put everything that has ever been developed that a partner or seller ever needs on there and hope that they get it at the right time, at the right stage of the buyer's journey, right? So we need to make a change. The only way to address these challenges and solve these problems is to take a look from the buyer's perspective. It shouldn't be about us. It often is. You know, it's sort of like a corporate selfie, right? All about our offerings and our company and why you need to work with us. It really, truly needs to look at it from a buyer's perspective to understand what they're looking for to truly solve those competency gaps. So that is what we did. We took a look at it from a buyer's perspective. And now what Heather said at the beginning is what I want you to embrace right now, is innovation is not just seeing the horizon. Innovation is seeing beyond the horizon. What's coming? How do we get in front of it? And it's not just enabling partners, but it's enabling, and sellers, it's about enabling the interactions, not chasing the reactions, right? We want to get in front of it. We want to be very proactive about enabling our sales force and all of our customer-facing roles and able to have very confident, competent conversations so they can convert those opportunities. So when we look at it, and we went out, we conduct a B2B buying survey study every 2 years, so it's biannually. And what it represents is organizations across all of the major regions, so global in scope. It represents all revenue sizes of organizations and different roles within the buying process. So where we really took a step back and said, where are you making these purchasing decisions? Who is involved in these purchasing decisions? And so one of the criteria was that all of the respondents had made a significant B2B purchasing decision over the last 90 days. So not only is it very relevant timing-wise, but we also dug a little bit deeper. And we said, give us specifically recall what was significant and impactful in making that decision around the offering and choosing that winning provider. So this information is incredibly timely. It is not about us. It's about who we are trying to sell to, who we are trying to engage with, who we are trying to drive revenue with.
So one of the things that we look at, obviously, within this buyer study is thinking about the types, the scenarios of selling. I don't think it's going to be all that surprising to you that there's different types that we've categorized. When we think about it, we start from the individual. We think about the individual sale, the independent sale that is done with 1 or 2 people. This actually moves through a progression of more complex sales. Most people do think about it as there's the independent sale and then there's a committee or consensus one. We've actually seen a trend in the data that allows us to break those 2 pieces out and say you have not only the independent, but you've also got the consensus, which tends to be across decision makers, departments, but then you get to the higher level, which is actually across executives, and the executives are making those decisions. They're larger deals. They are more complex. They have more money associated with them. We continue to update the stats that you see here to reflect that buying environment. And I would say maybe a decade ago or so, we were seeing extreme trends in moving from the independent through to the consensus and the committee as well. We're still seeing those trends, albeit a little bit smaller, but they're still going and decreasing in independent consensus and going to consensus and committee. So thinking about this, it's interesting because independent tends to be more of a transactional sale, and obviously there's many more of them and they're smaller deals, but it's still reducing in size as we all try to make bigger deals, more complex, and the decision-making process is actually changing. So we have much more complex deals. The interesting thing that we also found is that there's a driver within the department level. So one of the questions that we ask is how many departments, not people, but how many departments are actually involved in this decision-making process? And back in 2015, about 14% said, hey, you know, there's 4 or more departments in this decision-making process. And by the time we get to 2019, that number has doubled. What that means is you have people that perceive the value of your offerings differently. So there's a different value proposition, they care about different things, they have different needs. And to be able to speak to all of those, you need a variety of people on your team to be able to articulate it. So those interactions are happening. We have both human and non-human interactions. I'll slow down a little bit because I see the cameras flashing. I'll talk slow. And we look at it across those three types, those three scenarios of sales. So interestingly enough, for committee and consensus, those human action, there's about 9. That's not 9 people, it could be, but it is 9 interactions on average when we're talking about it. So there's a lot of interactions and a lot of complexity, and we know that a lot of different types of people are having those conversations. So this is the analyst eye chart. Let me orient you a little bit. We tried to cram it all onto one. The reason we did this and made sure it was all in one is because when you look at this, if you're in enablement, whether it's partner enablement, whether it's direct enablement, whether you're enabling CSMs, tech resources, or direct sales, or all of the above, this is your money slide. This is our job security. Look at all those roles. The dark-colored lines here is how much they're interacting, which they said we interacted with this person in this particular part of the sales cycle. Now, we simplified it a lot. We said the sales cycle, yes, there's a lot of steps in between, but it's education, you're educating them, solution, you're helping them understand what product, what offering, what mix of products that they need, and then selection. We have those 3 steps in there, and in each step, you have different levels of interaction with each one of those people that are supporting the selling process. Now, the white lines that you see behind that, except for that kind of random bucket that says other, and we're not really sure who's in that, you will see on the right, on the side that says very positive impact. See that line? You'll notice that every one of those human interactions with all of these people, the buyer said, they have 84% of them said that this particular persona, this selling persona, had a very positive impact. So don't let anybody tell you that face-to-face or even on the phone, B2B selling is dead. It's not. You still want to talk to human beings. You still want to have those human interactions, and buyers find them extremely valuable. And again, for all of us, that is job security, because all of those interactions need to be enabled. And you're enabling at that interaction level of the people that are doing it. So when we combined all this data together, we found something that we hadn't seen before, ever in the survey. Historically, when we ask B2B buyers who the most impactful person is across all of the phases of the selling cycle, who's the most impactful person, who do you think it was? No, but that's your perspective. Doug enables sales engineers. But you're close. They said sales reps, the direct sales rep. And that's interesting, isn't it? But just in this last survey, you know what we found? That's no longer true. They're saying that the solution specialist, not the engineer, but the solution specialist is the most impactful person when you look at it across all phases of the selling cycle. Now, do you remember when Maria said, hey, one of the biggest, in fact, the biggest challenge for organizations not meeting their revenue number is the ability to attach customer needs and challenges and what they're going through to the benefits of your actual offering in a differentiated way. Why do we hire solution specialists? That's what they do. They understand it deeply, and they can make those connections between what the buyer needs and what you're offering. And I would guess if I asked for hands, but I won't because I can't see. But I would guess that you're not spending a tremendous amount of money on your solution specialist, not the engineer, but the solution specialist, because they have a high level usually of knowledge to begin with, and there's not a tremendous, not a lot of programs out there. But when you look at the types of interactions that they're having, how can you as enablers look and say, how do we replicate what's working and what the customer values and actually push it out to some of those other roles?
And I would challenge you to say, how many of you know who your solution specialists are at your partner organizations? And are you talking to them, right? Not only do you know who they are, do you know if they are on staff, but are you having conversations, are you enabling them? It's a huge shift in who's influential in the buying process. The second staggering or interesting news was that 50% of buyers say that they interacted with a customer service rep. as part of the buying process, right? And so if we think about this in the mind of the buyer, the customer service rep also translates into the customer success manager, right? So not only do we not potentially know who the solution specialist is at our partner, but this customer service rep or customer success manager is typically not who we're enabling. And it's certainly not who we're enabling at a partner organization. But 50% of the time. And then if 75% of commerce flows through indirect partners, and we don't know who the most influential individuals at our partners are, and we're not creating programs, scalable, repeatable, consistent programs to enable them, we're losing, right? We're losing mind share and wallet share from our partners. So if you have a partner, you need to enable them. 75% of commerce is going through indirect partners. This is a critical aspect of B2B selling and the purchasing decision. So I think that answers the question as to why there is a partner enablement person on the stage today talking to you as we kick off this conference. So as we move forward and we look at which of the individuals are interacting within that buying process, we see that there's a lot of different personas within the vendor and partner, so our sellers. And to recap, if we look at them, what Heather told us is that on average, they have 9 interactions, not necessarily 9 different roles, but it could be across multiple roles, right? So, but 50% of them are interacting with a persona that we're not actively enabling, that we're not actively engaging, that we may not know. And so it's not the typical enablement function that we see. In fact, if we take this one step further and we look at what are the most typical personas that we enable, on the direct side, it's absolutely the sales rep. It may be the solution specialist. It's that engineer that we talk about. But if half of the time it's the customer service rep, we're not talking to them. We're not doing that on the direct side. And if we think about that on the indirect side, and we say, well, wait a minute, partners are personas too, right? It's not just a reseller or a distributor. When you enable around an organization and you enable one subject matter expert and you assign accreditation or competency level to a partner organization, you are not truly enabling that partner organization. What happens when that individual leaves? That organization still holds that accreditation. It still holds that competency. You're expecting some sort of productivity, performance from those partner organizations. If we wait until finish line results and we wait to see what we got from a pipeline and closed revenue, we're going to find that we fall short. So we need to look at all those influential personas that directly mirror those individual personas on the direct side and look at which are the dominant personas that we need to include in our enablement activities. Now, this is going to differ by partner type. So for instance, if we have a global systems integrator, they might have an individual that we want to enable across all of these different personas. Because as Heather said, they might be a committee sale, highly consultative, right? It's a longer sales cycle. They're looking for subject matter expertise. If we're looking at, say, a solution provider or value-added reseller, VAR, we may look at, say, the sales, marketing, huge gap if we don't help them market our solutions, and say the technical individual. We have to look at the offering that we're going to market with and the buyer's journey across that offering and look at which are those dominant personas based on partner type and start somewhere. Go beyond sales, go beyond the technical. Really look at saying who are the individual personas that are touching the sales and buying process and start to develop a relationship and enablement program with them. Because it's not just about direct sales anymore, right? In fact, this will come as no surprise in this room because you are likely enabling individuals across different persona roles, probably outside of the traditional roles that we see. After all, we're in the Sales Enablement Society conference. We're not in the thinking about enablement conference, right? We're here, we're individuals. But if we think beyond this room, there is so much upside, so much opportunity, I'm an optimist, opportunity to have around enablement. And then what's even more exciting, and particularly for me, very, very interesting, is the trends that we see accelerating in the marketplace. We do an biannual CMO study. And in this year's 2019 CMO study, we asked them, what is the most significant marketing strategy priority that's influencing you over the next 2 years? So it's forward thinking. Partner enablement was number 3. We made the list. Isn't this great? CMOs remembered that they have partner marketing and partner enablement under their purview. Now, to be fair, in 2017, we are actually number 4. So it's continuing to accelerate and the trend is going up. Not only that, but when we look at those high-performing channel organizations, 62% of them said that they have had some sort of ongoing enablement for multiple personas. This is good news. Now, I said high-performing, so this doesn't mean everyone, and it's some ongoing. What we find is that it typically is ad hoc, it's not scalable and repeatable. So what we're looking to do is bring the rigor and structure and methodology around sales enablement, apply that channel lens, and look at who are those different personas, who are those customer-facing roles within that partner organization that we need to enable, and start to build the relationship and start that conversation and dialogue.
So it's one thing to be able to say, enablement for all.
And all for
Another
one.
thing to actually do it. So we wanted to really bring forth some of the folks that we work with and what we're seeing out there. And we have hundreds of conversations a year around these topics. And part of what we see is that there's different levels of execution, different levels, different perspectives. And just like we always talk about, everybody defines enablement slightly differently, and that there is no one-size-fits-all definition. However, we are going to give you one. When we think about it, the folks on this page who are talking to us specifically about enabling roles that go well beyond the scope of what you would think of as traditional enablement, they're at different levels. Some of them are telling us that this is embedded in our organization. We look at first touch with that, business development rep who's just trying to get that lead in, all the way through to post-sale customer success management and looking at the typical pathways that they need to do to engage the clients better, and even customer service reps, technicians, everybody. Others have said, hey, we recognize everybody touches the customer. We have our priorities because we understand the high-value interactions, and that's where we're going to focus our efforts, but we have a minimum viable enablement expectation for anybody that's touching that customer, from the executive level all the way down to somebody who has a casual conversation maybe in marketing. So there's a big range between how people are actually executing this. And then on the back end of it, there's a lot of kind of forward-thinking visionaries that we talk to that say, we want to get there, and we're preparing now. So we're taking sales out of our titles, and we're focusing this on interactions, and we're focusing this on the entire what we think of as revenue engine. So how do we get there? And a lot of these, as we said, kind of disparate points of view come from our different definitions of sales enablement. So I put it up there, and I know that two-ish years ago, we went through as an organization a big process, a very noble process to say, let's all agree on what the definition of sales enablement is. And I don't think we're ever going to agree on what that is. And that's okay. It really is. We have always defined it with SiriusDecisions as what is the goal and outcome of your efforts. We're not trying to define exactly how you do it in this definition. What is the outcome? So we look at it and think about, hey, you need to have the skills, the knowledge, the process expertise, and the access to the best assets to make sure that your reps are confident and competent to have the conversations, and they're maximizing every one of those interactions. You notice I didn't say managers or anybody else. That's inherent in the goal. So the goal of sales enablement is that. And when we talk to our customers, everybody says yes, and we also do it this way. But we talk about this as well. And that is fine. But if you can agree that this is the outcome of sales enablement, we can move to the second piece, which is what we started to do several years ago, and say, what is the difference between direct enablement and partner enablement? Because that is the biggest expansion usually when you're looking at what are we going to take on, how are we going to enable consistently, who is having those interactions.
So the goal of partner enablement, similarly to sales enablement, is ensuring that all of our partners possess the skills, knowledge, and process expertise and access to those great assets, right? To maximize every buyer interaction, but we're outcome-based while driving preference for supplier offerings, right? We want to drive preference and loyalty to us. If we enable them better than somebody else, they're gonna work with us more. But there's a couple of critical things here. It's not just sales enablement thrown over the fence to partners. You need to apply the partner lens. And I have to give credit to Heather, because when we've talked a lot over the last number of years about the movement in sales enablement and the movement to partner enablement, and we talk about the differences, and it's not just direct enablement, Heather said, I think of partner enablement as on a budget with bling. You've got to fund it, and you've got to make it exciting and it's shiny, and get them excited about enabling and training and participating with you, because when they're doing that with you, they are not doing it with your competitor. Now, the other piece that we have to pull out here is process expertise, because it can't just be what's to the direct side. We have to show them how to execute within our program. They to work with many different suppliers. They have their own processes internally. So we need to make it easy to do business with and define what that execution looks like. That's the additive piece, right? That's a bonus. How are you going to work, and how are you going to be successful with us? And then that last piece is assets. Access to assets. Remember, I talked about that content graveyard that is our portal. We don't invest enough in building content in the right way around solutions that include our partners. So we truly need to look at investing in those content assets, those stories, those references, all those key points that resonate with buyers at those key inflection points of the buyer, and provide them to the partner. It is in our best interest to make our partners successful, so we need to step up and develop the right content, retool it, not just throw it over the fence and wonder why they're not downloading and using our content. That it's poor adoption, they don't like us, they're working with someone else. We need to put it in the right form and then enable their usage of it. So it goes beyond just direct enablement, and I don't want to say just, because truly great sales enablement is truly great, but we need to add that partner lens and layer on partner enablement and the voice and persona of that partner within those efforts.
I must say, Maria, you do the whiny, clingy girlfriend thing. Why don't you love me?
No, I do
Very well. You do that.
Well.
It's from being in partner enablement, I guess. So we knew that when this definition came out, and both of them are still very valid, and they make a lot of sense in many organizations, but if we're going to take it a step further and think about it wider, how do you optimize the revenue engine as a whole? And we said, okay, you need to take it back and look at that customer interaction again. So if we're thinking about it across the entire revenue engine, we want to make sure that we're doing it for all customer-facing employees. So in the dream world, you might be actually doing it for all marketing and anybody that influences the people behind that. The reality is, if you focus your efforts on the people having the actual interactions, that's a great place to start, because you're making sure that those folks are having the impact and value that they need. Now, I've said 3 times, and I did it on purpose, revenue engine optimization. It's a very analyst-y term, because I'm not going to assume that means the same thing to all of us, or anything for that matter. We're going to take 2 seconds to walk through it. So when we think about revenue engine optimization in the terms of enablement, we're thinking about it in terms of what we call an aligned buyer's journey. So that line across the top that you see, it's just your standard, typical, not a customized buyer's journey. What's the buyer going through as they're trying to purchase your offerings? The second line is, what are the selling teams and the customer-facing roles actually doing to help that buyer navigate each step of that process? Now, depending on the sales methodology that you believe in, you're either helping them navigating, you're challenging them and telling them how to do it, or a million other ways to do it. So we're not talking about that. We're just saying buyer's journey aligned to a sales process, and the how you do it is the methodology in between. So this that you're seeing up there, you'll notice that it actually starts prior to them even becoming what we might determine as a prospect. They're a suspect. So it's starting at the very beginning and going through to contract. But no, we don't stop there. No, no. Customer life cycle comes into play. So once they sign that contract, then what? How do we continue to enable those folks that are having those interactions, and not just when there's a renewal, or not just when you think that there's an opportunity to sell? That entire, what we think of as what's driving the revenue engine, the steps and the processes within this entire scope, is how we think about interactions and what interactions are happening. So who in here has heard the term revenue operations being screamed on social media for the last? This is not what we're talking about. Now, they're hand in hand because revenue engine optimization needs several components. One of them is revenue operations. And at the heart of revenue operations is a shared view of that customer. Has a lot to do with data. There's AI involved. There's other pieces as well. But the primary driver in that is that shared view of the customer. When we're talking about revenue enablement, we're talking about a shared view of the interactions that are being had with that customer, and how are you executing them, and what the value is to them, and how can you make them better. I'll give a second because you guys are still taking pictures. Okay, so if it's all about the interactions, how do you actually get there? And while it sounds overwhelming when you look at, you're like, you know, I got 3 types of sales reps or 8 types of sales reps, and that's enough for me. I can't go beyond that. This is just way too big. It's very simple to actually net it down to the actual conversations, interactions that are being had with a customer within a selling motion. Not one, but multiple selling motions that you're having. It's not easy. I said it was simple to think of it that way, but it's not necessarily easy to do.
That's the simple, complicated
Yes.
version, like jumbo shrimp. It doesn't quite make sense. So how do you get started? Well, you start by assessing all those interactions that you have across now this aligned selling motion, right? Buyer's journey, customer life cycle, and the aligned sellers, both direct and indirect. And you start to map out and assess which personas are engaged in interacting with the buyer and customer at those stages. Who's flowing in? What are the interactions they're having? And how can I provide content and enablement that provides a positive, productive, consistent, how many times do we hear one rep say one thing, one partner say another, right? Inconsistency on messaging, offerings, differentiation, solution requirements, and benefits. So start to map out each of those personas and how they come into play. Now remember, we said that on average, the buyer has 9 interactions. That can be across multiple personas. So we need to look at it and say, who is the most influential persona at that time? Now, Heather also showed us with some of the buying study data that those human-to-human interactions are not only influential, but they're highly positive. That's the good news, right? We want to make sure that we enable our sellers, our customer service reps, our systems engineers, our customer success managers, our solutions specialists, as they interact with the buyer across each of these stages. But it's not just enough to start to assess that. Let's go back and hear one more time what our buyers told us. When we asked our buyers what was the most significant driver in their decision-making process, it's not all about us, right? It's not all about the seller and what I want to tell them. The most influential piece is customer experience, previous experience with the company. The number one reason. And by the way, that experience is the sum of all interactions that they have with the entire company, right? So we need to enable all of those interactions to be positive. This is what it looks like. Customer experience is critical both in the buyer's journey, right? New purchases, repeat purchases, cross-sell, upsell, everything that we hear about. It's critical, and we need to take a look at it. This is telling us that buyers are in control. They want to have a positive reaction. What you say across your organization matters. So it clearly states that customer experience is incredibly important and it's what it's all about. What this is clearly not saying that it's all about is the relationship that they're having with the sales rep. It goes beyond just one individual, and it's the sum of every interaction.
So we started out this presentation with kind of a worldview, and I encourage you to kind of think about your worldview in terms of the job that you do, which is likely enablement if you're in here. So one of the reasons why we all did so poorly when we first took that quiz is because you probably found yourself guessing a little bit at it and using kind of your intuition and what your perception is to answer those questions. And the reason why monkeys can score higher than us is because it's a true guess. It's a random guess. They have no preconceived notions, and they can guess at it in a way that is actually more consistent. So what we talked about here today was really buyer focused. And it might not have been what you expected. You might have expected me to come in and talk about how many organizations actually have a sales enablement organization and gave you a lot of benchmark statistics. And that's not what we did. We gave you kind of a bigger view of how the buyer influences and what's going on in the drivers there. When I went to go put this presentation together, I went out to Gapminder and I had to read the questions to make sure I was wording them correctly. And really the only way to quickly do that is to go through their quiz, which they have online, and it's 13 questions. I knew the answers to those quizzes because I was putting this presentation together. And at the end of that, I got a certificate that said, "Oh my God, you got 100% right. This is amazing."
And you're not a monkey.
And I'm not a monkey. How did this happen? But I started to think about it because I also read the book. And the book said, people that are highly educated and have more exposure to these things actually score worse on the test. And they've posted my name on the website, and I have a certificate that says, I'm a dumb monkey. So the reason people are not dumb monkeys is because they know they've taken the time to understand the answers, and that's the answers lie in understanding your customers, the interactions that are happening within your selling motions, and being able to take that information and find out what your high performers are doing differently and replicate and scale out across the organization and make it work. Don't be a dumb monkey, now you know. Thank you very much.